I'm going to tell you 3 stories, and each one of them has a moral at the end, so listen out for it. There were 3 brothers lived in Turkey. They were fishermen. They had their own boat, which was a sort of converted dhow. It was called a caique. I think you spell it C-A-I-Q-U-E. A caique, anyway. It was a fishing boat. They used to go out fishing every night, and well, it was their living. The thing is, out there it was very hot during the day, but at night the temperature used to drop right down, so it was almost freezing. Some nights there might be a frost. And they were really cold in this caique of theirs. So the oldest brother, whose name was Ab, he was quite bright, suggested that they get a wood-burning stove to keep them warm during the night. And so he left it to his younger brother, Abdullah, to make the arrangements to get the wood and the stove and everything ready. And the youngest brother of the lot, well, basically he was as thick as 2 short planks. He was Abdullah. And they left him to, they said, well, you've got to look after the fire, you've got to keep it going, light it and one thing and another. And so they got this stove fitted in the middle of this caique, and unfortunately Abdullah had forgot the fuel. So they started looking round for bits to burn, you know, a spar here and a bit here and a chair leg here, and so they got enough fuel to make a blaze and keep them warm. But when that died down, they had to start looking farther afield, and they started using all sorts of things, planks off the deck and everything. Eventually, they'd stripped the boat, there was nothing else. It was virtually a boat with a wood-burning stove on the keel. And Abdullah was still cold, so he ripped this keel up to put it in. And of course the boat sank, or what was left of the boat sank. Unfortunately, they were all drowned. And the moral of this story is, you can't have your caique and heat it. In Africa there was a chief who'd been king of this tribe for years, and he used to reign from an old wooden hut with a grass roof, and no such a thing as a palace, no luxuries at all. And every year on his birthday they used to weigh him, and people used to contribute gifts, and if the gifts outweighed the weight of the chief, everything was all right. If the scales fell short and he didn't get at least his own weight in things from the people, he would charge them taxes. So his head man said to him once, you know, you're worth a fortune here, you never spend any money, you've got it coming in every year, why don't you do something with it? And he said, well, I'm happy, what could I do? He said, well, you could get rid of that old oak throne you're sitting on for a start. And the chief said, well, that was my father's and his father before him. I don't fancy getting rid of that. And he said, well, you might as well, you can afford a golden one. People will really look up then, they'll come just to see the throne, let alone you. And so he was talked into it, so they ordered this golden throne. And the head man took the old oak throne out and said, what you going to do with this? And he said, well, burn it, it's no good, you won't need it. He said, oh no, the chief said, oh no, I'm not burning that. That's, I said, that belonged to my granddad, my dad, it belongs to me. I'm going to keep that. And so they said, well, we've got no way to put it. Anyway, eventually they said, well, we'll put it up in the rafters of your wooden hut, you know, your grass hut. So they, with difficulty, they manoeuvred this solid oak throne up into the rafters. Things went on for a few months, and then the inevitable happened. The rafters broke, the oak throne came down on top of the golden throne that the king was sitting on, and of course he was killed. So the moral of this story is that you can't wait a minute, it'll come. The moral of this story is people who live in grass houses shouldn't stow thrones. Another one in a different vein is there's a fella in the desert. He was dying of thirst. His horse had died. He hadn't got a camel, he'd got a horse, but his horse had died. And he was making his way. He was on his last breath practically. And he was going up this sand dune, and he felt something, and he went round it, and it was like a box about a couple of foot by a foot. And he scraped the sand off, and with his poor eyesight, you know, because the sun had affected his eyes, he could see IR wrote on it. And he thought, IR, what's IR? And he wasn't thinking too good, but he did realise that IR was Inland Revenue. And as he rubbed the sand off, suddenly there was a puff of smoke, and a genie came out of this case. And it wasn't a normal genie, with a bandage round his head and the turned up toes and a curved sword and baggy trousers. Wasn't one of them at all, it was a tax genie. He got a pinstripe suit on, an umbrella, a bowler hat, and he said, well, you probably know the story. You've released me from I've been in there for years. I'm entitled to grant you 3 wishes, and that's it. So he said, what do you want for your first wish? He said, well, I've got to have some water, I'm dying of thirst here. And he said, well, how much? Lots and lots of water, he said. And suddenly there was a flash, and there was a big oasis created just where he was, with a lovely clear pool, palm trees round the edge. And he dived in, drank as much as he could. And when he came out, the genie said, right, that's 1. What's your second wish? And he said, well, I'd like to have money. He said, well, how much money you want? He said, I can supply you with whatever you need. He said, well, I want a Beckham's ransom. He said, I want enough. I've never got to worry about money again all through my life. So there's a flash, and there was crates of gold bullion and US dollars, pounds sterling, Swiss francs, stacks of money all round. And the fellow was feeling a lot better after he had his drink. He thought, this is great, this is set up for life here. And the genie said, well, what's your third wish, and then I'll be off. And he thought for a bit, and he said, well, I'd like to be wanted by women. And he said, could you rephrase? He said, I'd like women to need me. And the genie said, okay, and there's a puff. And he turned into a tampon. And the moral of this story is, if you ever get a gift from the Inland Revenue, there's always a string attached.